Hey, how's it going everybody? You got Sketch here and welcome back to the channel. On this episode we're checking out a vertical shooter that I might not have heard of if it weren't for catching Shmup Junkie's video on new shooters to watch out for in the future, and many of those recommendations did not disappoint. And there's still quite a few on that list that are still upcoming games to be stoked on releasing later this year. Today's entry is an interesting and surprisingly challenging shoot 'em up. We're looking at Graze Counter GM, developed by Bikkuri Software, and published in conjunction by Sanuk and Henteko Doujin, releasing in January of this year. This vertical shoot 'em up does a few things differently than the others and straps you in for a ride of a game. But before going too much further, let's check out the story. The virtual reality network known as Eden is malfunctioning and holding its users captive. You're armed with the April Divider and the Freedom Dancer crafts and take the plunge into the servers. Uzuki and Satsuki venture in to destroy the operating systems and free the captives from the network. Anonymous Tip guides them into a hidden entrance and the mission goes from there. Gameplay wise, you've got a 2D vertical shoot 'em up where the name of the game is aggression. The main mechanic of this game is to graze bullets but not be hit by them. You'll quickly realize this becomes a bullet hell game right off the rip, but you got some defenses to keep you cruising through the servers. You have your choice of 2 pilots with varying shot patterns along with 2 unlockable characters once you clear the game. As the title implies, you want to graze bullets and enemy fire while not getting directly hit to fill your meters. Your graze counter meter being your charge shot, and the break meter, which much like the Dota on patchy games lets you have increased firepower for a limited time. Downing large enemies will drop optional upgrades like increased shields, gauge boost, increased break meter, and sometimes 1-up extends. Before beginning your runs, you can select several sub upgrades like auto shields, break boosters which allow for half breaks, and the safety system which temporarily makes you invulnerable once your meter exceeds 70%. With 4 difficulties ranging from novice, original, hard, and extreme, which ask upon selection if you're ready to cry. You've got several ways to ease into the game or just go right into the deep end. Extreme is no joke and is only for the hardcore, since even the opening section on stage 1 will leave most smoke. Through the game's 5 stages, you'll get branching paths on the 2nd and 4th stages, which feature unique boss encounters depending on where you go. Don't let the game's art style fool you, because this can get downright ruthless with bullet patterns and sheer bombardment of enemies on screen. Your ships can cut through the defenses well enough, but finding the balance of heavy offense with grazing your hitbox and not getting wrecked is the key here. Chaining kills together will cause enemies to drop stars, which count towards bonus points at the end of each stage, and the amount of bullets that you graze will also count towards your bonuses. Dispatching bosses quickly also nets you massive time bonuses, typically upwards of 100 million points, in addition to your other bonuses. Though be prepared to see the greatest hits of bullet hell titles, considering the fire patterns are all here, from popcorn bullets, tracer rounds, big ass lasers, and the tried and true barrage of spongy stage hazards like ice cubes that you must either shoot through quickly or just get out of the way of. While your charge shot can shoot through most enemy bullets, your double break only clears enemy bullets when it's activated. So both of these can give you some breathing room, but 1 hit is all it takes to shut you down. Bosses will absolutely body you until you either get a grasp of the grazing mechanic or dodge enough to where you completely avoid their attacks. Most boss encounters will allow you to trade off on your heavier attacks by building your meter for your graze counter, which will feed into your breaks. These will have you dump trucking damage at least until you fight the administrator, which is impervious to some of your attacks, but when you pop your breaks, you'll take its bullets off screen briefly. Encounters will keep you on your toes here, and even the novice setting will offer a challenge to most. Graphics wise, Graze Counter GM uses some really sick pixel art throughout its environments and sprites. As you run through the game's 5 stages, you'll see a fair amount of enemy types from small ships to giant battleships and hulking Goliath crafts. The look of this game reminds me of the Hudson shoot 'em ups that were on the TurboGrafx 16 and PC Engine, so the art style will likely appeal to those that are familiar with titles from that era. Backgrounds have some really nice detail, and once you get into more of the meat of the game, the levels really do house some rad visuals. The final stage has you sailing through the clouds into orbit to battle the administrator along with her final guard, and both of these fights are gnarly. Between letting off your break attacks or charge graze counter attack, the visuals are dialed up from start to finish. The cyberpunk anime aesthetic also lends well to this with its level design featuring some really slick layering effects. Your bullets stand out against enemies with their orange or blue color, while enemy bullets will be purple with lasers being blue. Bullets when they graze you will glow red, visually cueing you're in the sweet spot, but not in harm's way just yet. Paying attention to that hitbox is vital here, considering just a pixel or 2 over in the red will have you burned. The hard pixel sprite work over top the detailed backgrounds looks fire here, and for something that's fairly new, it's got style drenched in the 90s almost caravan shooter aesthetic. The slick intro cutscene breaks down the story with an opener that feels like some of the shoot 'em up epics from the PC Engine and Sega Genesis. In-game short dialogue cutscenes open up boss encounters as you meet each guard, and these will switch in narrative depending on which character you're playing as. The indie cutscenes follow suit as your character gives a bit of commentary about the mission itself, so there's incentive to run each craft to see each pilot's ending. The color palettes are ultra bright, and the style looks razor sharp throughout each area, and everything is pretty easy to see from the enemy fire to obstacles in your path. Graze Counter GM nails the approach and aesthetics from OG shoot 'em ups and adds in some modern conventions for a visually solid experience. Sound wise, Graze Counter is crushing it with some high energy and groovy tunes throughout each stage. The music is one of the best parts of the game with some absolute belters, and you'll likely be jamming as you blast your way through Eden. Mochi 3 lays down some heaters throughout the game, and these tracks all got some proper seasoning. Sound effects are nice and crispy here with nice shot audio feedback, especially when you activate your breaks and charge shots. The sound of grazing bullets is also distinct with a modular buzz, letting you know you're in the sweet spot. Explosions explosions also have some various levels of boom, from the smaller craft to the tectonic crush of larger ones, all of which are satisfying. Graze Counter GM is a really cool take on manic shooters that exceeded my initial expectations. Once you get familiar with the mechanics, a few layers of gameplay open up, and to fans of cave shooters, this one is going to feel familiar. The art style calls back to 90s console grades, and the challenge can be steep, but it's fair. Learning the ropes on the initial difficulties is challenging, and going for the higher settings is going to make you work for it. With multiple paths, characters, and endings, along with a handful of extra modes, there's a good bit to digest here. While the game can be cleared in about 25 minutes, it's only after you've been clapped up by it a few dozen times. Once it all clicks, you can really start having some fun with how insane the gameplay can get. Graze Counter GM gets an 8.5 out of 10 and comes recommended to fans of vertical shooters as well as cave shoot 'em ups, since this one has a very familiar feel. The lighthearted art style deceptively holds an awesome bullet hell game with some fun mechanics to learn and high scores to achieve. 1cc runs are also challenging, and you'll have a good time with it even when it's kicking your ass at times. This is available on the PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series consoles, Nintendo Switch, and PC. If you're into shooters, especially of the bullet hell variety, give this one a go. And thank you again if you made it this far into the video. If you find this video helpful, that's awesome. Glad you can use it as a resource. Check back often. We'll have more reviews and commentaries coming in the near future. Until then, take it easy and stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next one.